Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Steeve Breton. Thanks for being on the show, Steve.
My pleasure, Whitney. Thanks for having me.
Steve started investing in small multifamily in 2012. He's invested in over 1,000 syndicated units as a limited partner since 2012 and acquired 760 apartment units in 2018 as a general partner. That's impressive. And, Steve, give our listeners a little more about your background and how you got into this business we call syndication.
Sure, yeah. So I spent the majority of my adult life in a corporate career, climbing that corporate ladder. And in 2008, got wiped out in terms of 401k and other holdings in the stock market, and started to think that there's probably a better way for me to secure my financial future, and started looking at real estate. Acquired a small portfolio here in Boston, twos and threes, three family properties. And in 2012, I finally decided to go a bit bigger and turn professional and start actually raising capital and getting involved in syndication.
So what pushed you to want to do something other than the smaller, maybe multifamily or single family like you already had? How come you didn't just grow that business? Why syndication?
So I did grow the business for a while, realized it was literally a job. In Boston, things don't cash flow quite as well as other parts of the country. So I was self-managing. And when I got, in the high teens in terms of the number of units I had, started realizing that it was taking over my life. At the same time, I had been investing in syndications as a limited partner, so a passive investor. And I saw the returns there were nearly as good as what I was getting with this sort of part-time job of managing my own properties. And after a while, I started to dig in a bit more to understand the syndication business. By then, I had been, in 2017, I'd been in syndications for 6 years, about a dozen syndications. And I got to know some of the partners pretty well, and they explained to me the business and the income, and I was hooked.
I've seen that happen numerous times where people invest as an LP and then they decide they want to, obviously be a GP, do their own business. And that's interesting. Or people have invested with me just so they can learn, and have those conversations. And, it's a great way to get started. So what happened next as far as going into syndication? How did you break from that and start pursuing your own syndications?
So the first thing, I was getting an education by being involved in syndications and picking the partners' brains and trying to understand the business. But I also didn't want to take too much of their time. They have a life and a family and other things going on in their lives. So I went and got myself some education, a couple of different education providers, eventually hired a coach. And by late 2017, launched my business. And then I started focusing on partnerships because I'm living in Boston where real estate, again, doesn't cash flow great. So it's not really prime for syndication. But at the same time, because of my corporate career, my age, the folks around me, friends and family, there was enough money here where I felt I could probably raise a fair amount for syndication. So rather than spending all the time in the markets trying to build the broker relationships and find the properties, I decided to find the best multifamily operators in the country. I joined a couple of mastermind groups as well. So I got to know these folks pretty well, 20 plus people fairly well, so that I understood which of them had the highest integrity, the proven track records, et cetera. And that's where I focused my energy. And eventually, they had deals where they needed help to raise the capital. They brought me on as a partner. So I would help with due diligence, the underwriting, investor relations, as well as the raising capital piece.
Nice. So you hired a coach, you started finding the best people, best operators and getting to know them. It makes so much sense. You learned so much by just surrounding yourself with those individuals.
Absolutely.
So, give us, you talked about being focused on partnerships after you launched your business in late 2017. And, could you give us, other than maybe joining masterminds and things like that. Maybe people, don't really know what that is, or the listener may have never heard that term before. Give them a couple things a couple steps they could take to find mentors or find those people to surround themselves like you did.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the first step and the easiest is probably to join your local meetup. So you can go to meetup.com. In any city, you'll find a real estate meetup. A lot of those are focused on the fix and flip business or landlording, but there's still some really quality people there that are looking at multifamily as well. So you can start networking there just to get a sense of the business. Maybe get some introductions to people that focus on multifamily. That's an easy way to start, and it's right in your backyard. The other is to get yourself a bit of training and start, going to Bigger Pockets and some of the other real estate sites, or on Facebook. There are a bunch of multifamily groups as well, and you can network there and get to know some folks. And then finally, if you want to really accelerate things, you can go and sign up for coaching. And the coaching programs, it's not just about the education piece. That's where you start to accelerate the networking and your circle of influence. And you'll meet people there that are just starting, and other people that are, they've been in coaching for a year or two. They have some success and they're willing to network with you. And depending what you bring to the table, they may need whatever it is that you have, right? Everyone has strengths and weaknesses. So it's a matter of bringing those two things together.
I think that's a portion of the coaching that a lot of people, you don't even know to think about that when you're just getting started or trying to get started. But that's a big part of what you're buying into, is that network. And it's a big part of how you develop and grow your business a lot faster because of that network of those people you're meeting and being able to provide value to them.
That's for sure.
So what's your focus right now in the syndication business?
So my focus, number one, I wanted to do this in order to make sure that I was able to retire at some point in my career, right? So when I got wiped out in 2008, I started to think again, like, what is my security really? What if there's a massive stock meltdown 20 years from now? So I started thinking, what do I do there? And real estate was the answer. So now I'm focused on how do I help my friends and family get to the same point, right? So I'm getting to the point now where I can see, maybe a couple years out, I could actually retire and just work on my real estate business, which wouldn't really feel like work because it's investing and it's fun and I really enjoy that. So how do I help other people, if not move directly into real estate, at least secure their financial freedom, whether it's now or in 10, 15 years from now? I want my family and friends and others to realize that retirement is totally possible, whether you believe Social Security will be there or not. If you invest wisely, if you save and invest, you can get there. And I want to be a piece of that for them, to help, whether it's education, help introduce them to these multifamily operators that I work with, so that, again, they can secure their financial future. That's sort of my give.
Awesome. So on the raising capital side, it sounds like you're raising capital and helping these other operators also and partnering with them. I guess get us started as far as, how do we start to raise capital like you have, and what does that look like?
So the very first thing I did was to create a sample deal. So what did that look like? I was making offers on properties, trying to buy a property that I could then have a few of my friends come in with me and provide some of the capital. As I was doing that, I started to realize the bigger the property, the more profitable for everyone. Not just me as a sponsor, but also my friends. But more importantly, the better the property management that you're going to have, because I'm not going to be managing these properties out of state. So we wanted to bring in institutional quality property management. And the way to do that was to go 100 units or more, which meant that I had to raise a lot more capital. So I put together a nice package, which would be ultimately the package that I would go out to investors with. And I started to share that with friends and family and say, not sure if you've ever thought about real estate, but if I had a deal that looked something like this, that returned, high teens in terms of returns, and those were tax-free or mostly tax-free, would that interest you? And as you can imagine, a fair number of them said, yes, it would. So that was my beginning as far as just getting people ready. And then eventually I found a great partner for my first deal. We had essentially a home run. We haven't exited that one yet, but it looks really good. And I did have several friends and family who jumped in on that one, and that kind of helped me take off in the career of, on the syndication side.
Nice. Yeah. So, moving from the LP to the GP side, what were some things maybe someone should consider that you learned through that process that you wouldn't know, that maybe you could help them understand ahead of time?
Yeah, there's so much. I mean, what I learned primarily was to get out there and take action. Right. So I wasn't sure how I was going to do this business, and how I would meet the right syndicators, and I started calling them and connecting with them. So your ability to get out of your comfort zone and take action, that was a huge learning for me. I did it a bit in the corporate side, but completely shifting your focus to something new, it can be a bit daunting. So that was one thing I learned. The other was it was more around, as I started to consider actually doing syndication and getting trained, I realized, even though I was a landlord or an apartment owner, and I had several properties, I didn't know anything about commercial investing, working with sponsors, working with all the different vendors that you need to work with, the property management companies, and more importantly, around the syndication rules or the securities rules, who you can talk to, how you can talk to them, all that sort of thing. Very important to get trained in that.
So you had talked about, getting out of your comfort zone and taking action. And I can definitely relate to that. And, when you finally make that decision, okay, I'm going to do this, and you really just have to forget about what everybody else thinks, right? Just say, okay, I'm going to do this. Walk us through that a little bit. How does someone, just really commit to that, and what helped you to do that?
A few things. So I've read a book called Turning Pro from Steven Pressfield. There's also Gary Keller's book, The One Thing. Those two for me were the most influential in terms of that mindset of, focus on what's most important. If you actually want to do this thing, you're going to have to take action. Turning Pro is really, just that. Stop dabbling, act like a professional. So if you were a professional in this business, what would you be doing? My first raise, I raised about $1 million. And I started to think, okay, it wasn't super easy, but $1 million isn't going to make or break my lifestyle. I can't leave the corporate job on something like that. So how do I raise $10 million? How do I 10x that? So thinking that your goals, or actually setting goals that are way higher than you think you can actually achieve, I think is one way to do that. So by doing so, I started to think, if I was a professional, if I wanted to raise $10 million a year, if I wanted to take down multiple large properties in this country, how do I do those things? And then started to break it down from there.
I like that 10x your goals. If you 10x it, then you only met it 5 times. Well, you're still successful, right?
That's right. Yeah. Well, it forces you to think about systems and other things that you wouldn't normally think about until you've grown enough to need them. Right. But if you're thinking, I'm going to raise $10 million, what does that look like? It's a lot more work. There's a lot more activity that happens when you're at that level. And this is the same thing whether you're managing apartments yourself or raising the money. It doesn't matter which part of the business you're involved in, or really any business you're involved in. If you're thinking that large, then it forces you to think about, how am I going to do that efficiently, which only helps you to get there faster.
I think raising $1 million on your first deal is very impressive. But walk us through some pointers that you can help us with. How we can get from raising $1 million to $10 million.
I mean, a lot of it is to, I heard a quote, I'm trying to recall who it was from, but it was something to the effect of, you need to get out of obscurity. So you're not going to raise capital if nobody knows about you, or if nobody knows about your product, right? What is it? So I focus on multifamily. Other people are raising capital for self-storage units or mobile home parks. And all of those are great assets. I just happen to love multifamily. But you really need to focus on, what is it that you're going to do? How do you get in front of people, right? So other than friends and family, right? How are you going to 10x that? You need to get in front of everyone. So doing podcasts, getting involved on Bigger Pockets forums, in other forums. Again, I mentioned Facebook. There's a lot of groups there. So helping people get into the business themselves, answering questions. So I knew small multifamily, 3 families, 2 families. I answered tons of questions about that. I've done a little bit of hard money lending. I answer questions about that. Wherever I can be helpful, and then that starts a dialogue. I do the same thing in my local meetups. So I'm always trying to add value in those meetups, and eventually that turns into a conversation. I've spoken at some meetups as well around syndication, but again, took me a couple of years to get into the position where I'm now the local authority on syndication.
Nice. Yeah, I like how you talked about positioning yourself where you're the local authority. So people are now looking to you, or they know of you as an expert.
Right. Yeah. And it's, again, it's not just about them investing with me. So when I speak at those meetups, I'm talking about how do you vet an opportunity? How do you look at these sponsors to make sure that they do have a track record of success? How do you look at their deals to make sure that the fee structure is aligned with the investors, not just with the general partners? How do you look at that deal to make sure it's in the right market and the underwriting was done in a conservative way? All those things are important. So whether they end up investing with me and use all that information that I gave them to validate my deals, or they can go and look at other deals. And I tell them all the time, you want to come to me with somebody else's deal, I'll help you do that evaluation. Whether I'm raising capital or not doesn't matter to me. I'll just go right through the same sort of points that I talked about in the meetup and say, okay, let's look at the cap rate. Let's look at the market. Is it a growing market? Are there jobs, et cetera?
Are you tired of answering emails from investors about when they'll receive their K-1s? Let the real estate CPA handle the accounting and taxes on your next syndication, and they'll file your tax returns by March 15th so you can get your K-1s to your investors by the individual filing deadline on April 15th. Not only will this reduce headaches, but it will help you retain investors over the long term by improving investor experience. The Real Estate CPA is now offering a special virtual workshop to the listeners of the Real Estate Syndication Show on how to answer tax-related questions from your investors. Learn more today by visiting therealestatecpa.com/syndication. So, Steve, could you walk us through a little bit then of just that relationship with that investor? So let's say somebody comes up to the meeting and then they say, yeah, I'd love to invest with you in a deal. How do you nurture that relationship, and what do you do to just keep developing that?
Right. So back to the SEC rules, Securities and Exchange Commission. So you have to have a relationship with the investors to begin with, right? So when they come up to me, if I hadn't had a relationship with this person before, so at that point, it's more about how can I help you? What are your goals in real estate? And for some people, syndication is the answer. For many people, it's not. So again, having a diverse background in real estate, I can sort of guide them and give them some pointers on what it is they do want to do, pros and cons, et cetera. And eventually, again, that relationship will continue to be fostered over time if it's a good fit. So if they start to think, and some people come back a year later, I tried this, I tried that, I think I just want to be passive, which is fantastic, right? So then we'll go out to lunch and we'll have more discussion around what is it like to be a passive investor. Let's walk through a deal in great detail, right? How will I communicate with you about the property and how things are going in terms of renovations or occupancy levels, et cetera? What do the returns look like? Over time, they get very comfortable with that. And then, at some point, I'll put them on my list. So when I do have a deal to share, I put that out to my list and people simply respond if they're interested.
Nice. So long term, do you do any kind of email marketing? Do you do any kind of like active campaign or anything like that to just keep reaching out to these people?
I don't do a lot of that. It does concern me again with the securities rules.
Right.
We're not supposed to do any sort of advertising in this business unless you're doing a very specific syndication, which would only allow accredited investors. I like to keep things open so that anyone who's interested, who's at least what they call sophisticated, can invest in our deals. And so, again, mostly I'm sharing things on Facebook, but it's not deal specific. I'm just sharing, okay, here's a property that I'm looking at, or here's something we just closed on, or trying to give advice.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you
in
mentioned
terms of my
earlier,
list, I'll send a newsletter as well. But that's only quarterly. I don't want to, I think there's a term list fatigue. So
yeah.
I don't want to send too much to the folks who are on my list. I really want to add value. So it's a quarterly newsletter, give them a couple of pointers around real estate and then what I'm up to, and that's about it.
Awesome. So you mentioned earlier, even having the units that you already had and the portfolio of smaller multifamily or single family, but you didn't know how to work with a sponsor. You didn't know what that looked like. And so, could you give us a few pointers, of things that we need to know about that, just how to develop that relationship or going into that relationship?
So from the perspective of me being or wanting to be the person raising the capital.
That's right. Just going from, you already have these units, but you're trying to get into the syndication business and okay,
right.
Now I'm going to partner with that sponsor. What are some things we need to think about?
Sure. So the first is really thinking about what is it that you can offer, right? So, again, for me, being in the corporate world for a long time, I developed a lot of friendships. All of my colleagues have been in the corporate world for a while. So they had capital to invest. They also knew me, again, my closer friends knew me as somebody who knows real estate. So the strength for me was I'm a real estate guy. I have friends and family with enough capital to bring to a deal. And I know the real estate enough that I can start to vet those sponsors. So it was kind of understanding what my strength is and what do I bring to a partnership. In other cases, it's somebody who's working and living in a market where the deals are plentiful, but they don't have the capital. So they then find people more like me. So I knew that existed, the two sides of the business. And what I wanted to do was find the folks who needed the capital, find those sponsors. So I guess my tipping point there was when I decided to start calling people that I heard on podcasts. So there are several podcasts that are focused on multifamily. The folks that I would call would be people that were one or two deals in. They just started doing syndications themselves. I'm thinking, okay, maybe they're going to start getting bigger now, right? Maybe instead of a 50 unit, they're going to do 100 or 150 units. And perhaps they're going to have trouble raising $2 million versus the $1 million they raised on the last deal. So that's sort of the sweet spot, I think, of connecting with those folks and trying to understand, what can I bring to the table? So that's what I did my first deal. That led to me, joining a mastermind group and then getting involved with people with a lot more experience. So now I'm working with people that have, thousands of units. They're raising $5 or $10 million per deal. And they, have me come in and raise a chunk of that equity for them.
So Steve, what's been really the hardest part of the syndication business for you?
The hardest part for me is letting go a little bit, because I did manage my own properties. And, when I'm working with a sponsor who's going to actually be operating the property, managing the property management company, they're the ones who are actively sort of walking those properties on a monthly basis. I'm not hands-on in this business any longer, right? As a syndicator, I'm bringing the capital. I'm talking to them, weekly or monthly, trying to get a sense of what's going on with the property to ensure that, it's going according to plan. And then I'll write up the monthly update for that property, but not actually being hands-on for somebody who's used to that. In my IT career, I was a project manager. So what I did was manage the business plan for multi-million-dollar projects. I'm used to having that control and having the understanding of every little thing that's going on. In this case, I have to step back a little bit, act more like an executive, and just sort of get the high-level overview and trust that, again, I'm bringing the best people in, so I should just trust them to do what they do best, just the same as they trust me to do what I do best.
What's been the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
I think, I'll give credit to coaching. So again, it wasn't just about real estate. It was about getting my mindset right, having the positive attitude, having an abundance mindset, and believing that I could achieve great things.
And what's a way that you've recently improved your business that we could all apply to ours?
So I said earlier that that thinking TEDx is forcing me to think about systems. So I've got some of those things in place, but nowhere near where they need to be. But just thinking in terms of, I need a CRM. I can't just track everybody in a spreadsheet. So a CRM system that's going to help me do a much better job of keeping track of who my investors are, what are their goals specifically. I might have a deal that fits one person and not another. So some deals cash flow better. Some deals don't have a lot of cash flow, but they're much more profitable in the long run, and as far as equity, as long as your major renovation plan goes well, or it might be a development deal. So in terms of CRM, getting something that's going to let you track all of that, so you can target the right audience with the right deals.
So tell us what you've learned about different CRMs, or maybe the one that you're going to focus on, and why.
So I've gotten a lot of folks that told me that Zoho CRM, which is a free CRM, is actually very powerful for what it is, being free. So I've literally just started setting that up. I was using MailChimp for a while, so that connects to my website. So when people come in and sign up for my newsletter, or say that they want future opportunities or want to be involved, that'll automatically capture their contact information within the MailChimp platform, and that's what I send my mails from. So that's worked as a CRM for this past year or so, or a year and a half, pretty well. But in the end, it's not powerful enough. So once you grow, you have to think about where you're going to go next.
Steve, you've been a great guest, and I appreciate the content and value you've provided to the listeners. And would you tell them how they can reach you and learn more about your company? Yeah,
the probably easiest way is to jump on my website, which is velocitycap.com, and that's short for Velocity Capital.
Nice. So I appreciate you again, Steve, and I thank the listeners for being with us today. I hope you'll connect with Steve, and you'll go to our Facebook group where we can all learn from experts and grow our business together from experts like Steve. And I hope you'll go to LifeBridge Capital, where you can schedule a call with me, and I'll help you any way I can, and look forward to connecting. And we will talk to the listeners tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.